Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program, Karen Sage, who is Chief Marketing Officer at MercuryGate. And today we're going to talk about the final mile, how predictive analytics can drive improvement. Now, in the transportation realm, deliveries can span across hundreds of miles or just a few miles. But in either case, there's a growing focus on the last mile, on the final mile. That is on, making sure that the customer experience, which could be a home delivery, is as exceptional and as delightful as possible. So what factors are driving this kind of growing attention on the final mile? Why is it so important today? And, how can technology and specifically transportation management systems and predictive analytics, help companies, both shippers and 3PLs, achieve excellence in this area? Well, those are just going to be some of the questions and topics we're going to discuss in today's episode. And it's great to welcome Karen back to the program to kind of share her thoughts and perspective and advice on this topic. So Karen, welcome back.
Adrian, very happy to be back. Thanks.
So, Karen, like I just said, a lot of focus on last mile, final mile delivery, right now. I mean, from your perspective, why is it getting so much attention today?
So final mile does seem like the topic of focus right now. Just, and despite all the hype, there are really good reasons for the recent interest. Let's talk about three of them. One reason is that the demand for final mile services have rapidly increased and will continue to increase. And this is mostly because of the rise in e-commerce. You might think that this has only to do with B2C, but also B2B has a large part to do with the last mile demand as well. The second reason is that final mile is a topic of interest of late for recent realization to the extent of which final mile is part of the overall shipping equation. Get this, over 30% of the cost of shipping is in the last mile. That's huge, right? Final mile also happens to be one of the most inefficient parts of the supply chain, clearly an area ripe for driving efficiencies. The third reason is that there's a lot of focus on final mile is the way that most people experience a brand. You kind of alluded to this before. How the final mile is executed has a profound impact on the quality perception of the brand. Done well, it can be an area that's differentiating. Done poorly, it can mean lost future sales and sometimes even return and rejection of the product that was delivered. So I realize that this was a long-winded answer, but the bottom line is while focus on final mile is indeed a recent fad, it's also a critically important focus area, both from a value and cost perspective.
Those are three great, great points. I mean, certainly over the past, 2-3 years, we've seen mergers and acquisitions in the space with 3PLs that are looking to grow or get into this area of the logistics market because it is so hot and it is a growing area. And I think that last point you made, which I kind of alluded to in my opening comments, this customer experience is becoming, a competitive differentiator. And I think it's one of those things where a lot of companies recognize that, they can do everything right, from, the sales process, whether the sales take place online or at a store. The customer can walk out happy, they got the product they wanted at the price they wanted, they're excited for it. And then that final mile experience can just ruin everything and really, damage the brand. If it's anything ranging from, hey, it arrived late. You told me it was going to be here at 12 and it's now 4:30 and you haven't shown up yet, to, someone, if it's a kind of a white glove delivery, someone tracking mud into your house or breaking, knocking over a lamp and breaking it or whatever. So, so many things can go potentially wrong at that last segment. And, how do you have visibility to it and how do you manage it? I think is an area that, companies are struggling with, which kind of leads me to my next question. I mean, what do you see as some of the key challenges that shippers and 3PLs, face in this area?
Yeah, well, while there are plenty of challenges throughout the supply chain, it does seem like the final mile has its unfair share of both complexity, cost, and things that can go wrong. So, here's the challenge. The final mile challenge is really in the cost of transporting individual segments to distinct and unpredictable, frequently low-density destinations. And all of these things typically require extra services. So think about delivery services in urban areas, for example. You often face travel, road closures, accident delays, even parking may be problematic. You can imagine that this is especially troubling when it comes to delivering large, heavy, or cumbersome goods to a door of consumer. Rural deliveries also have their own unique problems due to the lack of delivery density, added fuel costs, transportation time, and other factors. So, in addition, scheduled times for arrival, they're expensive from a routing perspective, and missed deliveries because goods requiring signatures when customers are not available. All this causes extra expense. So in all these challenges, I haven't even mentioned package theft or bad weather, the need for, like you mentioned, white glove services, or even the common practice of returns. It's estimated that the amount of e-commerce returns is as much as 30%. So you add this to the recent constraints from a supply chain labor shortage and the expectations of customers for fast, free delivery, you can see why this is a pretty big challenge to solve.
Yeah, it's, certainly I think you touched upon a lot of, variables and factors there that are, certainly play a key role in final mile that, may not necessarily always exist in the more traditional, DC to DC type of distribution where it's, more repeatable, you're going to always deliver on a certain day, a certain time type of thing. I was just at a business trip this week, and I could just imagine, all the home deliveries that were impacted in Atlanta where I was, because there was a soccer game that was going on. Again, it was, something that, many people from out of town didn't expect. And all of a sudden, we were rerouted because certain streets were closed, and there was policemen kind of redirecting traffic and detours. And I think that's just like a microcosm of, what happens on a day-to-day basis when you're trying to do a home delivery, is that you have things like events, as one example, that can completely change the, you were expected to go down this street and now you can't go down that street. You have to, deviate, a little bit. I think the other point you raised is something I hear a lot of, as well from a lot of folks, is this problem of having to redeliver, or you show up and the customer's not there and they need to sign, and now you have to, replan, that delivery, bring it back to the distribution center or the store or whatever the case might be. And that adds time, that adds extra handling, which can then result in damage, so on and so forth. So I think we could probably spend the whole hour here talking about all these different challenges and how they manage it. But let's talk now about, the role that technology can play here, right? And specifically, transportation management systems. I mean, how can a TMS, help address some of these things for both shippers and 3PLs as they're looking to kind of grow and expand in final mile delivery?
So a TMS helps, final mile challenges in many, many different ways. And as you can imagine, the technology for final mile is in rapid development. But that said, we can talk about a few things of areas today where TMS has an impact now. So, as a first example, TMS brings clarity by providing high-value status information over the last mile. A lot of carriers have improved traceability with proof of delivery and tracking information, but final mile is often handled by smaller regional and local final mile delivery organizations. Think about it like a courier. And so they don't necessarily have the technology. So even when there's gaps in final mile reporting, historical information can be leveraged in the TMS to provide probabilities of delays based on past performance. And you can really, segment that to a specific carrier in a specific area. That data can also be used for expectations for the delivery as well, in terms of communicating to the consumer. Another example would be in optimizing for cost and fuel consumption. The Mercury Gate TMS allows you to strategically determine the best drop points along a path to minimize the need for local delivery. You can do other optimization as well, looking at the best way to aggregate small shipments, when to leverage LTL for zone skipping, as well as when to hold on to packages for aggregation at pickup. Another important TMS function in final mile is really performance monitoring. In the last mile operations, this includes ensuring that the delivery services meet the requirements of the service level agreements, and really that translates into customer expectations. This particular capability is growing in importance as many value-added features such as white glove services, think equipment installation or setting up furniture, are added to the overall delivery services. As a final point, clearly cost management is a high priority too. It's a high priority activity in any shipper or LSP. TMS can analyze logistics cost over the full life cycle of an order and really determine the efficiencies and cost of the final mile. And that can be a focal point in terms of really looking at both what the issues are, but also the leverage that you can have in really improving that segment.
One of the things that you brought up is where it adds to the challenge is that, in a lot of this final mile, deliveries, it's a very fragmented. I mean, transportation market is fragmented to begin with, but it's very particularly fragmented in the final mile delivery space. You tend to have a lot of different carriers that you may work either at the local level. There really is no one national final mile carrier, if you will. So what we find is, that companies tend to work with, multiple couriers and other providers to, provide that nationwide coverage, if you will, if they're doing that, across the country. So being able to have that, being able to bring all that data and that information into a single platform, if you will, to have that integrated visibility in terms of what's happening with your final mile operations, I think is one key area where a TMS can help bring value to not only manage it from a cost management side and understand how much are we spending in final mile, but from a customer experience, customer service, performance management piece that you talked about as well, making sure that you're providing that consistent experience across the different locations that you're operating in. One area in particular that we kind of referenced in the title is kind of predictive analytics. I mean, how do you see predictive analytics playing a role here and kind of helping to drive improvement in final mile delivery?
So predictive analytics has an interesting value proposition for last mile. By compiling and analyzing the available TMS data, you can spot trends and create models to predict the future circumstances, and then take action based on those results. This will allow shippers and LSPs to make much better strategic decisions. For instance, say there's a driver that consistently is dealing with excessive wait times in a particular local delivery area during a certain time window. A TMS can help highlight that issue and allow a fleet manager to change the routing or delivery timing for future shipments to avoid that wait time issue. On the other hand, if a manager can't avoid the wait time delay, it's still valuable information in the TMS to predict and correct for that downstream impact, to say on other deliveries or calculating anticipated extra charges. A TMS with predictive analytics can also help things like optimizing route profitability and more. For instance, think about the importance of offering actionable information for both real-time adaptations and long-term planning. This clearly is an investment area for us, as we leverage our deep and broad understanding of the delivery and optimization. But I think, as an industry, it's also a very key area that allows a lot of promise or offers a lot of promise.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. And I think, bringing in this data and then being able to apply analytics to it and look at historical and even bringing in kind of real-time data from like traffic, let's say, or weather. I think when you start looking at some of the historical things, for example, maybe if you're delivering within these time windows, time of day, it's going to take X% longer to deliver versus, or either time of day or days of the week might, or if you're able to incorporate things like, the baseball schedule or the football schedule, the soccer schedule into, and bring that data in, hey, if you're going to be delivering in this neighborhood and there's a soccer game or a baseball game, that day, it's going to take X% longer or these roads are going to be closed. So, I think that's where I see a lot of that, some of the power of having the the base of TMS data, and then layering in this other additional information so that, in the future you can start predicting, more effectively in terms of how long deliveries are going to take, and maybe reroute in anticipation of expected, delays or changes out there. So looking ahead, just getting short on time here. So, as you're looking ahead, and how do you see, kind of final mile delivery, evolving? What new challenges or opportunities on the horizon? And, again, how will technology help address those new opportunities and challenges?
So, clearly both the instrumentation and data that fuel predictive analytics will continue to evolve, and will take final mile logistics and customer experience to the next level. And, since you allow talk about unmanned trucks and drones and, on Talking Logistics, let's talk about sort of dream futures here too. Imagine if we had the ability to start to deliver goods to customers before they even ordered them, or better yet, before they realize they even need them. And it's kind of the things that you were just talking about. If you imagine a future where you can simultaneously leverage the capabilities of an integrated TMS, ERP, and WMS to analyze and draw predictions from data like browsing behavior, purchase history, demographic norms, you could even consider adding unrelated data, weather data, social media chatter, and news reports. And all this can be used to predict what customers will purchase and when they'll purchase them. So, exposing data sources to predictive analytics, companies would be able to effectively shorten delivery times by moving inventory even closer to customer locations, and allocate resources and capacity to allow for foreseen demand or seen demand. You could even imagine requiring having as of yet unpurchased inventory constantly in transit to allow for instant delivery when orders are placed while the goods are in motion. So, clearly there's a long way final mile technology can go in the future. It's actually pretty exciting.
It is. I think when you think about some of the scenarios you just talked about, on the one hand it's exciting, other ways it's kind of pretty scary. It's like, holy cow. I can see it there. We've always talked about vendor managed inventory, right? From the business perspective, right? Have a supplier look at your manufacturing line, and as you're consuming, inventory, automatically trigger the orders to replenish the manufacturing line. Well, hey, will the day come, and we're almost getting there in some ways, where, brands will have, real-time visibility to our inventory. So when General Mills sees that I'm pouring my last bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios in the morning, and I think it's General Mills that makes Honey Nut Cheerios, right? They know that because they know that I go through one box every X number of weeks or days, and they're automatically replenishing me without me having to order. I think that kind of future might sound kind of far away, but I think it might be here sooner rather than later. And you're certainly seeing online ordering via chat box, right, via Alexa today. People just right in their kitchen, as they run out of something, placing an order with Alexa and Amazon shipping that out. And I think that integration between different data sources, whether it's chat bots or traditional order management systems or social media and so forth, the cycle of ordering and how that will impact final delivery, I think is only going to get more complex and more challenging, as we move forward here, which I think ultimately is good news for technology providers such as you, because the only way that companies are going to be able to manage all this is through, advanced technology and optimization and the integration of all this data and tools.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. So Karen, as a way to wrap up, what questions should, shippers and 3PLs ask themselves to assess whether their final mile delivery capabilities are, aligned with what customers expect either today or are going to expect in the near future here?
So most companies only react after the fact to, things like excessive last mile charges and service level failures. The norm has really been for companies to ship all or most parcels in a certain way and then realize after a time that they've been wasting money or disappointing their customers. This reactive approach can throw off departmental budgets, eat into profits, and damage brand reputation. So I think shippers and 3PLs should really ask themselves first if they're paying enough attention to last mile issues. I think it's really easy to hand off everything to a parcel carrier and assume that engaging with them that you have everything set. I think next, a shipper or 3PL should really ask themselves if they have the visibility into the process of final mile. Do they provide this visibility to the end customer? Does their TMS have the ability to create workflows that will take into account final mile value add, like white glove services? Another question to ask is are they providing seamless experience through to the last mile? Is everything consistent in terms of when they respond? So, exciting things are happening in last mile logistics, and the level of technology leveraged to push the frontiers of last mile delivery and same day delivery is really growing rapidly. I think, my last comment would be that everyone needs to take note of the trend and really the e-commerce and the focus on last mile logistics. And if they don't, they're really going to face losing to their competitors.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and some great advice there. I mean, at the end of the day, is taking a step back and saying, what are we doing in final mile? How are we approaching it? Are we taking the best approach there? And how is final mile impacting our business, or how do we want it to impact our business? Because I think if you do the final mile right, not only are you going to manage it cost effectively, but you could also leverage it as a competitive weapon. And I think that's where the more progressive shippers and 3PLs are really aiming for, is to excel in this area, because that could be certainly a competitive differentiator for them. So Karen, like I always say at the end of all our episodes, we always just scratch the surface on this topic. Like I said, we could probably spend at least an hour, if not two, going through more questions and aspects of final mile delivery. But thank you again for making the time to kind of talk through some of the highlights here and some key considerations that companies ought to be thinking about. So thank you.
Thank you, Adrian.
I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Mercury Gate website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Karen, you can post it there, and I'm sure she'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you very much for watching, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.